name is Daniel Thomas O'Brien. I brought in a display of insignia from my grandfather's World War I Army uniform, and also a book about all the members that they were able to list who fought in the war from Nova Scotia.
In 1914, Britain became engulfed in war. Naively coined the war to end all wars by an optimistic but heartbreakingly mistaken H.G. Wells, World War I was a period of unprecedented brutality for all of Europe and beyond. Despite the nature of the beast, young Nova Scotian men and women volunteered to fight alongside their Commonwealth kin in a display of altruism and civic duty perfectly aligned with maritime values. 30,000 of the province's sons and daughters travelled overseas during the Great War, leaving homes empty and families waiting, some for a lifetime. Though time marches on, the memory of their service continues to resonate over a century later in tomes of their exploits, and in heirlooms held dear across generations.
Danny, thanks for coming into Militaria today. You've brought us some interesting artifacts.
Oh, thank you for having me.
So what we have here is bits of insignia off of uniforms. And we have some actually from the First World War, and we have some from the pre-First World War period. The first one I'll discuss is the 66 Princess Louise Fusiliers cap badge, which would indicate that the person in question had prior service prior to the First World War. Now this one right here is a Canada Militia button that would have come off a uniform that was most likely from the uniform from the 66 Princess Louise Fusiliers. And here is a shoulder insignia for the 66 Princess Louise Fusiliers. So this would have been from the pre-World War I period. Over here, we have a shoulder title that was worn during the First World War. Here's a generic cap badge that would have been worn on a visor cap during the First World War. Here we have the Canadian-Scottish shoulder title. Over here we have a button off the 16th Canadian-Scottish uniform. And over here we have a small button that would have been off a shoulder board from a First World War uniform. And over here, this is a souvenir book from the First World War, and it's a listing of names of Nova Scotians that served in the First World War. So this is basically a souvenir book that would have been put out at the end of hostilities, and it would have indicated the names of all those who served. And a lot of families acquired these after the end of the First World War, and it showed, you know, that their loved one had served overseas. Now, you said you had a family member that was listed in here?
We have two family members.
I think it was Joseph Lutley, I think was the name that's mentioned, and it mentions your grandfather as well.
Yeah, Joseph Lutley would have been his younger brother.
Now, you had mentioned, Danny, that you believe these were from your grandfather, is that correct?
I thought these might have been from both of them.
What was your grandfather's name?
My grandfather's name was Frederick Thomas Lutley.
So I did a quick search just before we started, and I found out that Frederick Thomas Lutley had actually signed up in April of 1918 and served with the 1st Depot Battalion Nova Scotia Regiment. So I did another little bit of research because you had mentioned that you had your great uncle that had served as well and was actually killed in action during the First World War.
Yes.
Thanks to the wonders of modern technology, and I was able to access their files right off the internet, I found out that this most likely, all this insignia probably belonged to Edward Albert Nagel, who served with the 16th Battalion, Canadian-Scottish, during the First World War, and he also had prior service from before the First World War with the 66 Princess Louise Fusiliers. So most likely, all this insignia belongs to Edward Albert Nagel, who is your great uncle. So Danny, what can you tell me about your grandfather? Did you know him personally?
I knew my grandfather very well, yeah.
Did your grandfather mention the war much?
Not to me, no. Talked a little bit with some of the older family members. He saw a lot of horrors. I know it affected his life. Everybody who knew him of the older people noted how much he had changed when he came back. He saw things that a young man shouldn't see, I guess.
Yeah, definitely.
And in those years, of course, there was no help for the veterans coming back.
That's correct, yeah.
And there's probably not enough today, but in those days it was not very much at all. So he was very reluctant to say anything about the war.
So Danny, as we discussed earlier, your relative Nagel, who was your grandmother's brother, was killed on September 15th, 1918. He was killed during the battles known as the Last 100 Days, which were a series of battles that were pushing German forces out of France. So he was killed on September 15th, which was, I believe on that day, Canadian forces liberated the town of Courcelette, which was a particularly bad battle. You know, it would have been, tragedy. The war was almost over, and Edward Albert, of course, had seen so much of the war and suffered quite a bit, I imagine, some horrible, horrible battles, and almost made it to the end, but, killed during the last 100 days. Quite a tragedy. Thanks for bringing these interesting artifacts in today, Danny. What are your plans for these artifacts?
Well, they belong to the family. It's part of our family history, so I plan on keeping it that way for the present for sure.
Mm-hmm.
There are some relatives I haven't seen for a long time, and I know they would be pleased to know some of the information I've learned here from you.
So you're going to keep them in the family?
Keep them in the family, yeah.
Oh, excellent, yeah. Well, thanks for coming in.
Well, thanks very much for having me and for the information I've got. It fills in some of the blanks for me, so
Oh, excellent.
it's great.
My pleasure. Folks at home can learn a lot about their ancestors' military service thanks to the internet and modern technology. As we saw earlier, I was able to punch in Edward Albert's name into the Canadian Expeditionary Force archives located in Ottawa. Everything is online, so you can access it quite easily. You just have to know the name of the individual, last name, what war they served in, and it helps if you have their regimental number, and you can find out, get their service file pop up right away. Now, ordinarily, you can download the entire service file, which can be fascinating for a lot of families, because you can find out every step that their relative took.